I'm super privileged and honored to be sitting here with Valter Adão. Is that how you say your name? Adão?
Adão's fine.
Adão, good. How would you say it?
Adão.
Adão. Okay, there we go.
There's so many versions of it.
It's Russian, right?
No, it's Portuguese.
I'm joking. So, Valter, just for the sake of context, maybe tell us your position, where you're from, and the work that you do at Deloitte, and the challenges that you're busy solving at the moment.
Sure. So I go by the title of Chief Digital and Innovation Officer for Deloitte, and I look after Deloitte's digital and innovation portfolios in the market, as well as how we are transforming ourselves internally and thinking about this new future construct of work. And really what we, in terms of the work we do with clients, is to ensure that our clients remain relevant into the future. Correct. I think that's super important, because if our clients remain relevant into the future, so do we, because we've got clients to serve.
So that sounds like a super fun job, by the way. Is it as fulfilling as it sounds?
I'm really privileged in terms of the work I get to do and the people I get to interact with and the problems we get to solve.
Sure.
And I know, and my teams know, that by keeping a company relevant, by helping a product to market, a new service to market, we're contributing in a small way to an economy that desperately needs positive contribution.
Sure.
So it is quite fulfilling. I must say I'm quite privileged that way.
And you must then, with this role and the company and the types of clients that you have, and also the remit that you've been given,
Sure.
a very close lens on, I suppose, what's happening on the bleeding edge of technology, and I suppose with that in mind, also some of the real challenges that we're facing or about to face. Can you maybe elucidate on some of those challenges that you're seeing?
Sure. So, I mean, one of the challenges in this world of digital is probably the term digital, and the fact that we sort of relate digital to everything technology. We relate it to everything disruptive, cutting edge, etc. What's important is that we've got to find the balance between these disruptive technologies, this new disruptive way of thinking, which in actual fact I think is more important, but we've got to balance it with the right economic models. So if it doesn't have an economic advantage to the organization or to the consumer, etc., it doesn't make sense. It's a gimmick.
Sure.
And so it's always about finding that balance, being on the cutting edge of thinking around these technologies, but also being very practical about how you take it to market and make it real, and so that it adds value.
It reminds me of when augmented reality came out, and everybody and their dog was like, yes, we need to do augmented reality, and it had absolutely no utility. Precisely. Right? It was just a gimmick. Yeah. So I suppose there's always going to be a lot of that, right?
Correct.
So I mean, with this fast-paced world, then, I mean, what are the things that scare you?
I think what frightens me, both at an organizational level as well as a country level, is that quick isn't quick enough anymore. Digital is also synonymous with a new way of thinking, being far more agile, taking risks in a controlled and governed way, being curious, experimenting, etc. And I think what frightens me is organizations that think they've got time. Let's see how this thing plays out. When the dust settles, we'll move. Or countries that think, well, we'll just resist the change that's taking place around the world. I think that will all result in some form of negative outcome.
Sure.
So certainly things that keep me up at night, or that I think a lot about, is how do I ensure that my organization, which sells knowledge, is on the cutting edge of that thinking in the most practical and relevant way. An acknowledgement that knowledge is decaying at the quickest rate that we've ever seen before.
Sure.
So how do you ensure that thinking is the latest thinking, that it's relevant, and that we embrace a mindset that says that I don't want to be a know-it-all, I want to live and act like a learn-it-all,
Sure.
Which I think it gives you that competitive edge. From a country perspective, my concern is that we've got first world economy businesses that we need to retain and maintain globally competitive. And we've got third world problems around unemployment and poverty.
Sure. So there's this massive disconnect, right?
100%. And one would think that, without a doubt, I do believe our biggest and best corporates need to modernize, they need to digitize, they need to ensure that they are globally competitive and that they contribute the economic base that we so much need in the country. That's vital. But when we think about that modernization and digitization, we tend to think loss of work. and we're going to create a bigger problem than what we have at the moment. But the reality is that the only way I believe we can solve the work challenges that we have is by leveraging these same technologies that we think are going to take jobs away.
Yeah.
So we need a mature and balanced view, and we need dialogue. We need to sit around the table and realize business, government, the individual, the entrepreneur, etc. We're playing on the same team.
Sure.
And so we've got to start collaborating and working together around this problem.
And that symbiosis is really, it's really critical for us to understand. I look at education, for example, and education has been affected by technology like nothing else. I mean, 100%. It's crazy in terms of the access to information that we have, that you can pretty much do any course that you like online, right? And you can access pretty much a Stanford degree and the content therein by going online and downloading it yourself. Of course, you don't get the context and the relationships and the community, but that is the truth, right?
Correct.
But at the same time, that doesn't solve schools that don't have humanizing conditions sitting in the townships and the people that are left behind, so to speak,
It's a big challenge.
So that disconnect is, hopefully we can, as you say, start working together in a more intentional way with really tackling this disconnect. And with that in mind, I think, what are the sort of rays of light that you're starting to see in this tumultuous environment that we find ourselves in?
There's a couple of things that really encourage me that I'm seeing on the continent. Okay. One is the realization that perhaps the future of employment is self-employment. And I refer to the rise of the micro-entrepreneur, which is not the entrepreneur that's inventing these technologies, but the entrepreneur that's leveraging the technologies to become self-sustainable. And I refer to three economic constructs. There are more, but those are my three favorite, which is the rise of the distributed value chains, where small entrepreneurs are filling the gaps that corporates are unable to fulfill in terms of bringing that experience to the end consumer. So you and I are essentially money rich and time poor. We're living in a world of timeplosion. We want to get more done with less time. And as a result, we will pay a premium for someone to fulfill the things that we need done that we can't get to.
I love that, timeplosion. That's a great term. Yeah.
And there's a gap for entrepreneurs. We're seeing even Masayoshi-san of the Vision Fund has invested into over $500 million into two businesses that address that. One being DoorDash and the other one being WAG. And through those two companies, he's created in the region of 500,000 new jobs.
That's amazing, yeah.
Right, so that's the kind of thinking.
These micro jobs, yeah, and that's a whole economy in itself,
correct.
Right? Yeah.
We're seeing definitely a world of economic catalyst where digital is reviving industries that have gone flat. And we've got phenomenal South African entrepreneurs playing in that space. These are guys like Stockfella and Livestock Invest that are certainly reviving businesses that have gone flat in the past. And then collaborative consumption is such an important thing. A very poor individual cannot afford an asset that would fundamentally change the way in which they earn money. But if they can bring the community together to use that asset, then the ownership of that asset is justified. And the community, by having access to that asset, it has the same benefit as owning the asset. And so we're seeing a lot of agricultural solutions where a collaborative consumption is bringing about a shift in those sectors that's creating employment. So I am hopeful. Yeah. But we're not going to get to where we need to through individual actions. I think it needs certainly an individual push and energy, but it needs collaboration, and it's the citizen and the entrepreneur, government and private sector coming together and working to create harmony around policies, harmony around incentives, harmony around creating opportunities for entrepreneurs. And education that you touched on is such an important thing.
Sure.
But I'm looking for short-term educational intervention. So teaching people to code, yeah, that's important. I certainly acknowledge its value. But I think there's far greater value in the short term to teach entrepreneurs critical skills thinking and resilience, the ability to articulate, the ability to use these digital platforms.
Sure.
And that can be done easily, cost effectively with short-term results.
Sure, that's great. And I think a lot of those solutions, a lot of those segments that you touch upon are uniquely, almost uncannily geared towards the South African context and the African context, because that community aspect is really it's part of our heritage, it's what we know, right? So I think just in closing, Valter, what would be your advice to leaders, not just entrepreneurial leaders, but also leaders within corporates and management, in order to face and effectively face this uncertain future?
There's a lot I could say, but in terms of two key messages that I'd want to leave behind is, for our business leaders, is try and drop the cynicism and skepticism that exists inside organizations. And I remind myself of this on a daily basis. As we go through our education system and as we become, develop our careers and go through the world of corporates, one thing that we do is become very skeptical and cynical. We question everything, and unless there's overwhelming evidence, it cannot be true. I think that is changing rapidly, and we've got to move away from the world of skepticism and cynicism to one of curiosity and experimentation.
And playfulness, that's right.
Correct.
Yeah, I think that's such an important concept.
And then what goes hand in hand with that is moving towards a mindset that says, as a leader, knowing it all is probably no longer valuable. It's about getting into a mindset that says we want to learn it all. I'm curious, I want to keep on learning. And I acknowledge and I'm vulnerable to say I don't have the answer, but I can get access to someone that may have the answer. And an acknowledgement that your industry paradigm and deep years of experience may be your biggest blind spot. And so those would be the two key messages I would pass on to leadership.
Amazing. And I think there's a huge correlation between the advice that we're seeing from many of the heavy chefs that we're having in our stage, and a lot of people are very encouragingly coming to that same conclusion, that it's not just about understanding the technical details of it, but it's more about the mindset with which that you approach those technical details as anything else.
Fantastic.
So thank you, Valter. Thank you for your time, and thank you for your participation with Heavy Chef. It's going to be awesome to see you on stage.
I look forward to it. Super.